Welcome back, y'all. The V2 rollout last week alongside the new betting strategy turned out to be extremely profitable. We ended up the week with 10.64 units of profit. So this week we'll be using the exact same strategy. Kicking off UFC 312, we have Hyun Sung Park versus Naimjargal Tumendembarrel. I'm going to need Uncle Chael to correct my pronunciation on that one, I think. These guys are both exciting lightweights with a ton of finishes. Hyun Sung Park is a little bit older, but nothing significant. But he is giving up 7 inches in reach, which could be pretty substantial in this fight. It's also important to know that Park's been away for well over a year. He was scheduled for about mid last year, but pulled out due to a knee injury and hasn't been back since. Despite the time away at the books, Park is still a pretty substantial favorite at minus 220, but both of the models are leaning the other direction. V1 pretty heavily at 61% for Tumendembarrel, while V2 just barely sees him eking it out. I'm not extremely confident in this prediction, but our betting rules are very simple. Both models agree that Tumendembarrel will win this fight. On top of that, he's an underdog, so we will be betting 1.5 units on this fight. Next up at lightweight, we have the undefeated newcomer Cody Steele versus the much more experienced Rong Zhu. Both of these guys very similar in height and reach. Cody is slightly older, nothing significant. Days from their last fight, not far separated. Cody does only have 7 professional MMA fights, but he does have an extremely extensive grappling record. Rong Zhu's record of 25-6 does look very impressive, but do not forget that he is currently 1-3 in the UFC. At the books, Cody is a minus 240 favorite. Version 1 of the machine learning model gives Rong Zhu a very slight edge here, while V2 is much more confident in the direction of Cody Steele. Just as we did last week, we will be betting with V2 of the model, and since Cody Steele is a favorite at the books, we'll be betting enough to return 1 unit. Our next fight, also taking place at lightweight, is between Quillan Salkild and Anshul Jubli. Both of these guys are 7-1, but Salkild lost his very first professional MMA bout, while Jubli is coming off of his very first loss in his last fight. Jubli will be giving up 6 inches in reach and has been away from the octagon for a very significant amount of time at 476 days. Despite this, V2 of the model still sees him as a very small favorite in opposition to V1, who sees Salkild as the favorite, much like the odds. Despite this, we'll be betting with V2 of the model and taking Jubli as a plus 350 underdog for 1 unit. Moving up to 170, where Kevin Jousset will take on Jonathan Michaelev. Kevin will be the more experienced fighter in this matchup at 10-3. He does have 3 fights in the UFC, while Michaelev will be making his UFC debut. There is a 6-year age gap here, but neither of the two are at an extreme where that should be of much concern. At the books, Kevin Jousset is a minus 240 favorite. Meanwhile, both version 1 and version 2 of the prediction model are favoring Michaelev in this fight. Because of this, we will be taking Michaelev as an underdog for 1.5 units. Kong Wang and Bruna Brazil face off in our next bout at women's flyweight. Both of these women have very similar attributes, with age, height, and reach being almost nearly identical. The one significant difference we see here is that Kong Wang is making a pretty quick turnaround. It's also important to note that she is coming off of her first professional loss. The book odds indicate that she should bounce back from that loss pretty easily at minus 450. V1 disagrees here, but only slightly at 54%, while V2 is even less confident, but has Kong Wang winning at a 52% probability. We will be taking Wang here to return 1 unit with a win. Another lightweight fight is next between Tom Nolan and Vyacheslav Borishev. Both of these guys have big power and they don't like wasting time. Between the two of them, they have 11 KO finishes, with every single one of those coming in the first 2 rounds. Nearly all of the attributes here seem to favor Tom Nolan. He's 9 years younger. He does have a significant height and reach advantage. He's very long for this division. But somehow the book odds still have him as a plus 134 underdog. Not really sure why here, but both V1 and V2 of the model favor Tom Nolan pretty significantly, so we will be betting 1.5 units on him. Closing out the prelims will be Jack Jenkins versus Gabriel Santos at featherweight. We will see a slight height and reach advantage for Gabriel in this fight, but I think what is really interesting is their recent records. Jack has only suffered a single loss since 2018, and that was due to an arm injury against Chepe Mariscal in September of 2023. Gabriel, on the other hand, came into the UFC undefeated at 10-0, but has since gone 1-2 in the promotion. Regardless of what I think here, the book odds at minus 225, V1 of the model at just over 50%, and V2 of the model at 59%, all agree that Santos is a pretty decent favorite to bet on in this fight. Kicking off the main card at welterweight will be Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado. Jake Matthews has nearly twice as many fights here and will be 8 years older. He does have a very small height and a decent reach advantage here. Neither guy has been extremely active as of late, only taking 1 or 2 fights a year for the past few years, and both going 3-2 over their last 5 fights in that time period. Matthews is a relatively small favorite here at minus 210, although V1 sees Prado as a decent underdog bet with 56.5% chance of winning. Despite that, we are betting V2 all the way right now, so we're taking Matthews as a favorite here for 51%. Up at light heavyweight, we have Jimmy Crute taking on Rodolfo Bellato. Both of these guys, very similar records at 12-4 and 12-2 respectively. Similar in age and height, but Rodolfo will be coming in with a 3.5-inch reach advantage. Jimmy Crute has been on a terrible run recently, losing 3 of his last 4 fights, all by finish, and the 4th of those going to a draw. On the other hand, Rodolfo has been on quite a good run, winning 4 consecutive fights, with 3 of those by KO TKO. At the books, Rodolfo is a small minus 170 favorite. Both versions of the prediction model agree with this at 59.8 and 52%. We will be taking Rodolfo here as a small favorite to return 1.5 units. Up next at heavyweight, we have Talison Teixeira versus Justin Tafa. These are 2 guys that epitomize what we love about this division. They go out there, they bang, they get KOs, and it's almost always in the first round. Teixeira is a young heavyweight at only 25 years old, but he will have a 7-inch height advantage and a 9-inch reach advantage coming into this fight. Given the odds on Talison's recent fights, minus 152 at the book seems to be very favorable odds for this guy. Both V1 and V2 of the model agree very heavily. They think that the line should be much wider in favor of Talison, but I'm happy to get minus 150 here. We'll be betting enough to return 1.5 units. In the co-main event for UFC 312, Weili Zhang defends her strawweight title against Tatiana Suarez. Suarez has been away from the sport for a notable amount of time at over 550 days. This is because she pulls out of a lot of fights. She is pulled out of 3 of her last 6 scheduled bouts. At the books, this is very close to a pick'em, with Tatiana slightly edging it out at minus 116. The version 1 model odds reflect that very closely, giving Suarez a 52% chance of victory, although V2 of the model leans very, very heavily the other direction and is pointing us towards betting on Weili at 66.8%. We will be betting on Weili here as the underdog for 1 unit. Closing out the night, we have the middleweight title rematch between Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland. We've seen this one before. I don't expect any real difference in this fight. Dricus is going to come in with his wild, unpredictable style, throwing mad haymakers, while Strickland slowly marches forward, pawing and lifting his knee, trying to stifle any real offense from Dricus. I think if there's any real chance of a finish here, it's certainly on the side of Du Plessis, but for all we know, he may just implement some wrestling this time around and grind out a boring decision win. At the books, Du Plessis is a minus 205 favorite, which falls right in line with both version 1 and version 2 of the model, which have him in the high 50% chance of winning. We will be taking Dricus Du Plessis in this fight for enough to return 1.5 units with a win. Looking at our totals, we were able to generate odds for 12 fights on this card. Version 2 of the model predicts 5 underdogs to win on this card and 7 favorites. V1 agrees on 7 of the 12 fights in total here. Even with the increased bet sizing, our total risk this week is pretty low at only 17.6 units. Our potential win is a little higher, 37.5 units for a potential gain of 19.9 units. A potential of 113% ROI. I believe this is the highest potential return we've ever seen. Thanks again for watching. Good luck with all your bets this weekend. We'll see you guys next week.